Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello and welcome to Authors on Mission podcast, the podcast committed to uncovering top-tier insights and strategies from established experts who have achieved remarkable success in their fields. I'm your host, Danielle Hutchinson, Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission, and today I'm thrilled to welcome Jim Marshall, a polymathic scholar and the creator of an entirely new field of study called Septemics. Jim has devoted over 50,000 hours to studying human potential and development, with expertise spanning psychology to philosophy, theology, and so much more. He created his groundbreaking book, and he's been managing human behavior through 35 distinct scales of development. So if you ever wondered why people behave the way they do or how to better understand yourself and others, today's conversation will be illuminating. His work has been described as a conceptual cookbook that provides a roadmap for personal growth, improved relationships, and ultimately mastering the game of life. So I'm excited to dive into this fascinating system and learn how we can apply these insights in our own lives, and also talk about the writing process that went into it too. So Jim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi Danielle, glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure to have new people on all the time, and this is really unique because, you've pretty much developed an entirely new field of study here. I'm very excited to hear a little bit about it. I think that's where I'm going to start today, just by asking, what on earth is Septemics?
Okay, Septemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to humans occur in a sequence of 7 levels. Literally, the word Septemics means of or pertaining to 7. Septemics comprises a collection of scales or hierarchies, each of which breaks down various human phenomena into a hierarchy of 7 steps. There are 35 such scales, each of which is unique. And between them, they span the spectrum of human experience, by which I mean any problem, dilemma, difficulty, situation that any person has that has anything to do with people can successfully be analyzed by one or more of these scales, usually more than one.
That's really fascinating to know. How did you come across all of this? I'm assuming it came from your many years of experience and you developed it just by, doing some research, probably running some experiments, or perhaps not. I'm very curious.
I'll tell you exactly. First, let me give you one sentence to put this in context, and then I'll tell you the story.
Okay.
I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I developed a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics, and published it in the book, Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. So here's how this came about. The story really begins at the age of 16 when I was accepted into engineering school. Now, of course, I thought at the time that I was going to be engineering physical things such as airfoils, motors, electrons, and such. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear to me that I wanted to engineer the human psyche, because that is the area of greatest mystery, of greatest unknown, and more importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the problems in industrialized society are because people don't understand people. Don't understand the wife, don't understand the husband, don't understand the son, don't understand the grandmother, don't understand the boss, etc., etc., etc. This goes in all directions. And that's the main problem that people have today, if you really look at the situation. Because technology has advanced so far now that pretty soon we're just going to have robots fixing our cars. So it's all about dealing with people. And most people can't. So to make a long story short, I had a long career as a human development engineer, working one-on-one with hundreds of clients of every description for cumulatively thousands of hours. Of course, all of my clients improved as a result of this. I was using engineering devices, engineering theories, engineering techniques, engineering machinery, engineering strategies, et cetera, et cetera. This is not like what most people would think of as counseling, not counseling. I said very little, but I used biofeedback, which really made it go about 1,000 times faster than counseling. So I was able to get great results. But incidentally, as this was going on, I started to observe that I could predict the outcome of the session. I never told that to anyone, but I made notes. And as the decades rolled by, it became obvious to me that the client would be at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed and recorded. And as a result of our interaction, he would go to the next level up on that scale. That happened thousands and thousands of times. And every time it did, it verified my hypothesis. Because you have to understand, the clients didn't know anything about this. They didn't know what I was doing, how I was doing, what I was recording, or anything. All they knew is they had a problem or an unwanted condition. They came to me and I helped them resolve it.
Understood.
So by 1995, I had recorded, based on direct observation, about 32 scales of human phenomena that simply appeared in the session. Now, after I would go out of the session into the real world, I'd go to the bank or the supermarket, I would see exactly the same phenomena in those people, and they had no idea who I was or what I was even thinking about. So this really made it obvious that this was a real thing. So one day in 1995, I was pondering a difficult case, and I realized that this client was at a level on a specific scale that I had not previously observed. I had a 6-level scale that I knew was correct, but then that day I really realized, it has a 7th scale, and that's the level this client is on, and that's why I had trouble with this client, because I didn't know that level. So as soon as I saw what the level was, it was obvious to me where to insert it. That was never a question. And as soon as I inserted it, at that moment, that scale went from being a line, which is what a scale is, a line, to a plane, meaning a whole body of data. Because all of this mathematical information jumped out at me. So now, instead of simply having a scale with 7 levels, I had all of these intersecting, interlocking mathematical phenomena that all related to this scale. And having taken 26 semesters of math and having loved every minute of it, I saw this for what it was. I saw that there was math embedded in this thing, like the Fibonacci sequence. So then I said, whoa, whatever this is, it has to be natural law because it has mathematics embedded in it. And then I thought, I wonder how many of these other scales that I have are actually 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way. Because you have to realize I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients and making notes. So now, knowing what I was looking for, I now inspected all of these other scales. And in a short period of time, each one went to 7 levels, and when it did, it manifested mathematically. So now I had 32 7-level scales, all of which had mathematics embedded in them. Now, let me talk a little bit about math for those of you who are allergic to math. The whole point of math is that you start with a formula or an equation and you coax data out of it. You use the laws of mathematics to develop it into something useful to you. That's how Einstein found E equals mc squared. So when you have data jump out at you, that is an inherently mathematical phenomenon. You see? So that's how I saw that this was natural law. So I thought, wait a minute, this looks like a new subject to me, because even though I went to school for 28 years, I never saw anything like this before. So this could really help people. Because my next conclusion was, I could go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I had been doing for 40 years as a human development engineer to helping people by the millions if I put this data in a book and get it out so people can have it. So I'm going to have to write a book. So the first draft was finished in December of 95. And I immediately sent it in a transcript form to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects. And to make a long story short, they all loved it. They had different responses, but distinctly positive, enthusiastic responses. And that told me that this was exactly what I thought it was, which is a new subject that people would really get. Now, I have to tell you, that was 30 years ago. In the 30 years, many people, hundreds of people have read this and gotten involved in it. Nobody has ever said to me, I don't get this, it doesn't make sense, or anything like that. Nobody has ever said it. What they say usually is something like, wow, this is big. Because this is an entirely new subject that spanned the spectrum of human experience. So I then spent, beginning in December of 95, I then spent the next 25 years of my life writing this book. Because you have to realize first, I had to discover the phenomena, and I pretty much already explained how that happened. Although I did find 3 more skills as I was writing the book. Then I had to take this data and I had to utilize it to craft a workable philosophic system. Now, as an engineer, like all engineers, I'm only interested in facts and results. In the engineering world, you cannot say whoops, not allowed. You can't have the bridge fall into the river or the plane fall out of the sky or the cell phone just stop working. Whatever you make, it has to work. That is what engineers are about. So we have factors of error and tolerances for all of this. So what we do is we use known facts, established facts, and then we make calculations, mathematical calculations, and then we always put factors of error into everything to make sure it will work all the time. So I had to create something that would work all the time for everyone. That took 20 years. But the most time-consuming aspect of this was expressing it in a way that would make sense to the average reader. And I know I succeeded at that because I've been watching people get this now for 30 years. They get it. People who don't know anything about this, they open the book, they look at it, and at first blush, they say, oh, yeah, this makes sense to me. You know why they say that? It's natural law. So think about this. Can you remember the first time you saw the Pythagorean theorem? You were maybe 13, 14.
In elementary school.
Right. But at some point you saw it, right?
Yeah.
N squared plus B squared equals C squared, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. And they taught you how to use it, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that to most students, especially those who have a facility with math, you get it right away and then you have it for the rest of your life. It's inarguable. And it is a major step forward. So if you tell me that your garden is 3 yards on one side and 4 yards on the other side, I can tell you without getting out a tape measure that if you want to make a diagonal walk, it's going to have to be 5 yards long because it's the Pythagorean theorem. And it's always right, you see? Or some people have asked me, what book is your book like? And I have to tell them, being a well-read person, I don't think there's ever been a book like this before, at least on Earth. Maybe on another planet that we don't know about. But there is, however, each of these 35 skills is expressed in what you could call a table or a spreadsheet. And that table is very similar to the periodic table of elements. Can you recall the first time you saw the periodic table of elements?
Probably around the same time as the Pythagorean theorem, I would say.
Right. And I'm sure you said something like, after looking at it a little bit, All right, this makes sense. Hydrogen is 1, helium is 2, lithium is 3, and it goes down horizontally and vertically. And all 79 elements that existed at the time, that were known at the time, were put in there by Dmitry Mendeleev. Now, since then, we've got another, 40 or so elements that we have just kept fitting into it because it works. So every science book and science classroom in the world has the periodic table because it works, because it's natural law. And I absolutely guarantee you, and I'm not the first person to think this up, when we get to other civilized planets, they are going to have the periodic table of elements in their own language. And that will give us an entree immediately to translating our language to their language. We call it hydrogen and they call it Charigny-Bob. See, right there in the table. So, see, and the same thing with all the other things in mathematics. See, the formula for a circle, pi r squared, and they will show them the circle. And oh, I get, that's the way they write the formula. And then they'll show us their formula and we can translate it. So we know what they use for pi. You see, this will go very fast. So each one of these 35 scales is a periodic table for the corresponding subject of human affairs. So this is like a huge leap forward for mankind to get this data. Now, what I should do now is tell you the names of the 35 scales so you'll know exactly what subject matter is addressed in the book, right? So there are 24 individual scales and 11 group scales. These are the individual scales: the scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And these are the group scales: the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Any one of these scales by itself could dramatically improve the life of the reader. And let me give you a very simple example. I mentioned the scale of motivation. One of the most important things to know about anybody is their motivation. Why is this person doing this, right? You ever think about this? Why is this guy talking to me, right? He's got some motivation, you don't know. Now, I have done the heavy lifting by getting it down to only 6 layers. And the other thousands and thousands of motivations are just subsets of these. So you could ask yourself, using this scale, what's my mother's motivation toward me? What's my father's motivation toward me? What's my husband's motivation toward me? What's my boss's motivation toward me? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you could do this on everybody you know and everybody you have ever known, right? You could be using this one question to fill in the blanks 200, 300, 400, 500 different ways. Now, here's the beauty of it. Every time you spot it correctly, you'll have a realization. So you'll say, oh, mother's motivation toward me is level 2, duty. That explains why she acts like that. You see, you're having an insight. And then you go to your boyfriend. His motivation is status. Okay, that explains why he does this, 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 and this. Every time you spot it correctly, you have an insight. So now you could take the same question, reverse the vector, and ask, what is my motivation toward Joe? What is my motivation toward Fred? What is my motivation toward Carol? What is my motivation toward my pastor? And you could use it again another 200, 300, 400, 500 times. And every time you spot it, you'll have an insight. That's why I couldn't get along with Joe, because I had this motivation, see? So by the time you finish this exercise, you will have had maybe 500, 600 insights. So your mind will be significantly clearer because you'll know the motivation of everybody in your life and your motivation toward everybody in your life. That is a big step forward. That's no longer an issue. Now, this is very important. You know, the way the police solve crimes, they look for someone with a motive. They've been doing this for centuries. They say, well, look, this guy has nothing to gain by this guy being dead, so we're not going to investigate him. But there's an insurance policy for $250,000, and the wife is the beneficiary, so let's look at her. No, maybe she didn't do it. I'm just saying that's how they go about it. They look for motive, right? So this is really useful. So let's say you're dating some guy for 3 years, and you're talking about getting married. Big step, right? Wouldn't it be reasonable to ask yourself, why does this guy want to marry me? I mean, isn't that a reasonable question? I'm not saying to ask the guy. I'm saying open the book to the scale of motivation, because you know this guy because you've been dating him for 3 years. So when you study this scale, you see there's only 7 choices from which to choose, so it's not a hard choice. You know, it's not like sometimes you go to a restaurant and they have like 300 things on the menu. That's a hard choice. This is only 7. It's like going to In-N-Out Burger. They have like 7 things, you know? Is it gonna be a hamburger or cheeseburger? Okay, cheeseburger, that's it. Okay?
Nice and easy.
That's part of the beauty of this. So you get it. So let's say you look at this and you're thinking about Fred, your boyfriend, and you say, oh, I see why he wants to marry me. He loves me. That's level 1, the highest motivation of all. So let's set the date. But maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe after you do this exercise, you say, you know, now that I thought about this for a while, I think Fred wants to marry me because I drive a Lamborghini, I buy my own Learjet, I have a 60-foot yacht, I live in a $15 million condo, and I have $10 million in the bank. See, that's a different motivation.
Right.
That's level 4 money. I'm not saying it's good or it's bad, it's just different, right?
Right.
So now, what you choose to do with that is up to you. That has nothing to do with me. You might say, okay, this is not the first time this has happened. He wants to marry me, but this guy is good looking, he's smart, he's funny, he has a good job, I have fun with him, so I'm gonna marry him anyway. And maybe you live happily ever after. But maybe that's not what happens. Maybe you say, you know, if this guy wants to marry me for my money, I don't think I want to marry this guy. I want to marry somebody who loves me for myself, and you break up with him. See? Opposite result. Same or observation, opposite result. Because that's up to you. You can do what you want, right? So now you might think in that latter case that you would be upset, and you would be wrong. You will not be upset. Because every time you correctly spot a level, it's a positive experience. Ah, now I understand why he said this and this and this, and why he did that and that and that. See, that's positive. So you're not going to be upset. You're going to be relieved. You're going to say, thank goodness I figured this out now before we had a train wreck. So you see, that's how this works. I'm just giving you a simple way from this one scale, how you could use this to make your life better very quickly and easily.
Well, that was a whole mouthful there. I think our listeners might need to take a little bit of a breath as they process everything, because it's also remarkable and easily put and something you can implement so easily. I mean, you mentioned a couple of times how, you know, just like a periodic table of elements or anything, it takes a minute to wrap your head around, but it is something very useful in many different regards of life. So I do appreciate you sharing that with us. But now kind of transitioning into the writing realm a little bit.
Okay.
Being so complicated, it must have been very difficult to compress that all into a single book and put it so that everybody could access it. So can you share a little bit about what that writing process was like for you?
Okay. Well, first of all, you have to realize, as I explained earlier, I was observing these phenomena decades ago, before I ever got the concept of Septemics, before I ever dreamed of writing a book, right? So I knew these. I would have a client come into me, I see he was at that level, and I would know he was going to go up to this next level, and he would. See, this just made me better at what I did. So I was just writing down what I saw, writing down what I saw. just like what any engineer would do, like an engineer says, well, we ran it on this fuel, we got 3 miles per gallon better than on this fuel, see, and he would note that, see, and that would go forward into the project. We get better mileage on this fuel, see? So that's sort of what I was doing. So this is spread out over decades. Then, as I said, by 95, I had about 32 skills. I had simply recorded from what I saw. So that was already there. So then I explained to you how, when I saw that first scale become mathematical, when I put the 7th level in it, and I then knew what I was thinking about, and I explored all the others, they all went to 7 levels. So you see, all of that was very scientific and mathematical and engineering. It wasn't about writing. Because realize you have to understand that if you're in any STEM subject, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, it's all about analytical thought. If you cannot think analytically, you cannot be in the STEM subjects. And there are many people who can't. They do other things. So I'm a very analytical person. I'm a notoriously analytical person, and that's how I process everything. So when I saw this, and then I got this feedback, writing it, the first draft was not that hard because I had the scales. See? And I just said, and I had been thinking about this for decades. Well, this is what this first level means. This is how this second level manifests. This is how this third. I just wrote down what I knew, see? Wasn't that hard. Then when I decided, okay, I'm going to spend 25 years perfecting this, then it became a writing project. And the hardest part, as I think I mentioned, is expressing it in a way that will make sense to the average person. So this is an 86,000 word book. I literally had to go through this book word by word, asking myself, how are people going to take this word? Is this the right word? Is this really expressing? No, I should use this other one, So there were years and years of that, of just like being Roger with the Thoris coming out of it, So that was very time consuming, but you have to realize I'm a serious scholar, so doing stuff like this in general is not unpleasant to me. I mean, I went to school for 28 years and I enjoyed it. So this was just like, writing another thesis, writing another paper, So it wasn't really hard, especially since you have to realize I told you I released the first version in '85 to colleagues of mine. And when I got it back, I rewrote the whole book, second version, and I sent it out to friends and students and colleagues and so forth. And I got feedback, rewrote the whole book. So this book was rewritten at least a half a dozen times. And each time it was moving it toward making it clearer and clearer and clearer. And everybody who reads this book said, yeah, you make this very clear. People get this. So that was my intent. And I guess you could say it was a labor of love because I'm a very intellectual person. And I knew I had something big here that could really help people. So it was a very iterative process. The other thing you have to realize is it's nonfiction and it's really based on science. So there's not a lot of creativity in it, unless you want to say selecting the right word is creative, and I don't really think it is. Like coming up with the title, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. I spent a lot of time. Do I want to use the word hierarchies,
Right.
Do I want to use, and I spent a lot of time thinking about, is this the right word? Now, I was already an accomplished writer, especially in nonfiction, so I was sort of used to the rigors of this type of thing, where you're looking for the right word. So that's what this was like for me.
thank you so much for, sharing that whole process. I mean, clearly it's been many decades in the making and went through many different processes. I mean, you explained how even, the simple choice of wording is, just comes a huge amount to play into that. So I'm wondering now, do you have any advice for writers out there who maybe have a concept like this that they've also been working on? Where would they even begin if they were to follow in your footsteps and write a book on such a complicated matter? Of course, not the same as you, but there's many people out there listening right now wondering, how did he do it? So what kind of advice would you offer them?
Well, first of all, let me say there is a world of difference between creative writing and nonfiction writing, right? So if you're writing poetry or novels or short stories, it's coming out of your mind, That was not the case here. This was empirical data that I simply observed and recorded. And then I just explained it to people. But you have to realize, I have been tutoring since I was 14 years old. So I was very good at explaining things to people that they did not understand, because that's what tutoring is. I had a career of cleaning up the messes made by the mainstream education system, which is just getting worse and worse. It has been getting worse for 60 years. And I've heard from many smart people that they did not succeed academically because of the education system. They succeeded despite the education system. And I understand that because I loved school and I loved learning. And even I ran into some really clunky teachers. So most of the teachers loved me because I was very conscientious. But there were some teachers that were just bad people. I mean, could go into horrible stories. There are people who are spiteful and have mental disorders and things like that are teaching, So let's separate the creative thing and just talk about nonfiction. So when you're writing nonfiction, you have to have an encyclopedic grasp of the subject. And then you have to bring a mastery of the English language to it. For example, you could have a guy who understands law very good, but he doesn't really know how to write. So his briefs are not convincing. And then you could have a guy who's a good writer, but he doesn't really know the relevant law. So he's still going to have trouble. So I've done a lot of law work. Although I haven't been admitted to the bar, I've done a lot of work as a litigant, where I've saved myself millions and millions of dollars, literally, by not relying on a lawyer. And I would study the law. Okay, this is the relevant law. Go to the law library, study it or look it up online. And then I sort of knew how to write. And, I worked with some paralegals and I learned a few tricks. And so I was able to write things that were compelling to judges. I mean, I successfully brought an appeal. 9 out of 10 appeals failed. I brought an appeal that won without a lawyer. Now, if you're not in the legal world, that doesn't impress you. But if you are, they'll say, how could that be? Mm-hmm. But I learned law the same way Abraham Lincoln learned law. He had at most 12 months of school in his entire life. He never went to any kind of law school. He just read books. So, there's a lot of brilliant people who didn't have schooling. Henry Ford never went to school. Did you know that? His mother taught him how to read and write and do arithmetic.
That's pretty incredible. I mean, sometimes you just have to learn from experience and those around you. So I can see exactly where you're going in terms of writing your own book, right? To express the knowledge to others so that they can also, get the same understanding.
Right. But let me tell you a trick that I learned working with my clients, including as a human development engineer, as a tutor, and so forth. Look at it from the other person's point of view. A lot of people have difficulty with rhetoric because they cannot look at it from the other person's point of view. How is the other person seeing this? So when I'm writing a legal brief, I'm thinking, I'm being the judge, see? I'm getting in the mind of the judge. I'm looking at it through his eyes. It's not about me. He's the guy who's going to make the decision. It's the same thing with working with my clients. I would look at everything through the person's eyes. You know, Jack Kennedy said something brilliant. He was a brilliant man. He said one day in an interview, think about how this looks to the Russians. You know? So that's what you want. You know, you don't want somebody saying, Russia's bad, we're going to defeat them. That's how you get in trouble, see? You know, he was working behind the scenes to make peace with Khrushchev. That's one of the reasons they killed him. So that's what I try to tell a lot of people when I teach people communication. Look at it from the other person's point of view. How is this other person going to perceive it? And I'll give you an example. There's a scale of sexuality. Level 2 on the scale of sexuality is a level that most people never attain. It's a level where you can take it or leave it. There's a type of person, if the girl says yes, that's good, and if she says no, that's good too. He's not upset about it. And so when I saw this level in people, I saw, okay, they can take it. And then I thought, well, how am I going to express this in a scale? So you know what I called the level? Take it or leave it. I just called, if you get to this, look at it, level 2, it says take it or leave it. Everybody knows what that means who can speak English. So it's a good way to explain it. Now you can say, well, that's not very elegant writing, and maybe that's true. But I wasn't interested in elegance. I was interested in helping people. So I could just see some guy looking at this, trying to figure out what's going on with his girlfriend. He says, take it or leave it. That's how she is. She can take it or leave it. No wonder I'm having this trouble, see?
Right.
He's at level 3, which is what you might call love with commitment, you know, falling in love, having a wife, that type of thing. She says, take it or leave it, you know? So that's not going to work for them. That's a conflict. So he could see that and then say, okay, I see why this is not working. So that could save him a lot of trouble. And that is the whole point of this book. It saves you a lot of trouble. Believe me, I've been watching people use this for 30 years. It's like a shortcut to things. Because let's say you have a guy who's trouble with his mother-in-law. He says, she's a control freak, you know, she wants to control him. So he looks at the scale of control. He gets down to level 6. Level 6 is must control. That's how she is. She must control everything. No wonder he calls her. See, now he understands. He may not be able to get her to change, but he understands what's going on. Here she comes again. Now she's going to tell me what napkin to use, what tie to wear, you know. So he just says, okay, that's where she is. And, you know, I'll just put up with it until she leaves, and then I'll put on whatever tie I want. So I was very interested in writing this in a way that people would get. And that's how my whole career was as a human development engineer and all of my tutoring with people. You know, when I work with a student, it's not about the material and it's not about me. It's about the student. I watch the student. So I'll show the student something and then I'll look at his face and see, and then very often they'll go, oh, now I see what you're doing. All right, he got it. He had his little realization, you see? Now we can go on. So that's my advice to nonfiction writers. Look at it from the reader's point of view. Now you can say, well, every person has a different view, and there's some truth to that, but you have a public, right? This book is for people who can read English reasonably well and want to improve themselves or others. Okay? That leaves out about half the human race. About half the human race has no interest in improving themselves or others. That would include psychopaths, sociopaths, professional criminals, war criminals, serial murderers, all kinds of idiots, ignoramuses. They're not interested in self-improvement. They're not up to that. So It's not for them. So I know who my public is. So I write for that public. So if some professional criminal were somehow to get a hold of this book, he would not read it. If he did read it, he would not understand it. And even if he did understand it, he wouldn't apply it because it's contrary to his way of life. Because this is about uplifting people, not about cleaning out their bank accounts and stealing their lives. So when you write for a public. You have to think. And if you look at the nonfiction genre, that has taken shape. You have many subcategories now. What do you have, like 100 subcategories, Young person's fiction, see? That didn't exist 20 years ago. So, there are people who have different publics. A perfect example is Robert Heinlein. He had 3 different publics. He had sort of the general sci-fi public, where he was competing with Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, but he also wrote juvenile. He wrote for kids too. And if you read those stories, they're different. They're for kids. And plus he also had an adult section. I don't know if you ever read his adult books, but he's got a lot of adult science fiction, where you don't want your teenager to read it. So he wrote for 3 different publics. He was able to do that, a very brilliant man. He saw this situation. He said, well, I have this idea for a book, but we don't want kids to read this. They're not going to understand this. They're going to write this for adults, you see? So you have to know who you're going to write for, and you have to target, and then you have to look at it through their eyes.
Right. Thank you for all of that. I mean, first off, to anybody listening today, there's been a lot of inspiring and practical advice when it comes to writing books and also implementing Septemics into your writing and into your life and into whatever it might be. So that being said, I'm curious if anybody has any more questions for you or wants to get in touch or to follow along with your course, how can they find you online? What are your links they can click on to find you?
I invite your viewers to my website, which is septemics.com.
Oh, there we go.
S-E-P-T-M-I-C-S, where you can see what many readers have said, what many journalists have written. You can read the reviews. You can read sections of the book itself. And there's even a 15-minute pre-recorded introduction to Septemics that you can listen to that explains it to a new person in 15 minutes.
Oh, well, there you go.
I get a lot of feedback that it's a good website. People like it. It's very clear. And it gives you a lot of different ways of accessing this, So there's things there you can say, gee, I wonder what podcasters think about this guy. There's a whole section. Here's what the podcasters have been saying, long section. So if you go there, you'll find out a lot about me and the book, how people experience the book. And I invite you people to do that because this is a life-changing book. And I really want people to benefit from it because your success is my reward.
Hey, there we go. I love that. And that's a perfect line to ending our podcast today. Your success is my reward. Clearly, it's all about to you what people get from it and, just benefiting humankind in general. So I really appreciate just all of this. And you've really laid it out for us clearly. So, all the more reason for everybody listening today to check out the book. We're going to have the link to your website in the description of this podcast. So as soon as we're finished here, guys, you can go ahead and click that link. Jim, I want to thank you so much for being an amazing guest on our show, really diving in depth and helping us get a great understanding of your groundbreaking work. It's truly been a pleasure.
Thank you, Danielle. It's been a pleasure talking to you too.
Thank you so much. And to all of our listeners today, remember, Authors on Mission is dedicated to empowering you with the knowledge and confidence to become an expert in your own right. Whether you are also an aspiring author, an entrepreneur, or somebody seeking personal growth, I hope today's conversation has given you valuable perspective to consider. Jim's book is available on Amazon and many other retailers, and I encourage our listeners to explore this unique system, see how it might transform your understanding of human behavior, and just thank you for tuning in. Remember, we don't just discuss authors and entrepreneurs, we immerse ourselves in their world to bring you cutting-edge insights that help you keep you ahead of the curve, just like this one. Jim, thanks again for joining, and for our listeners, keep writing, keep leading, and keep inspiring. Thank you for coming.
This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.